Yes, thank you. So there's lots of big words here. Let's start with the first one, deliver. By that, I generally mean to have some artifact that we make available by uploading to an artifact registry or by giving it a new name, as in a new tag. Whereas deploying, that means to actually install it somewhere, which is not necessarily the same thing. All right? Yeah. The next step is GitOps principles. You might have heard of them. The idea is to have a declarative description of how your environment should look like, have it versioned and immutable. That usually means you have Git. That's why it's called GitOps. To have a history, to see what happens when, who did what, and why. And that should be pulled automatically into your environment and continuously be reconciled to make sure that at every point in time, everything is exactly like it says in that magic GitOps repository. There's two very common tools for this, Argo CD and Flux CD. Both can be used to do this. And what happens is very simple. You have your repo on the one side that gets monitored by Flux or by Argo, and they make sure that whatever's in your cluster actually reflects what's described in this repository. So if you now want to deliver something, you create a new artifact with a new tag, or you then tag an image with a new tag. If you then want to install it, all you have to do is go to that GitOps repository and update the corresponding YAML files. Very simple, but also manual. You want one-click deployment. So how can we automate this? Well, both Argo and Flux have these concepts of, in Flux it's called the image automation, Flux calls it the image updater. Basically, they monitor your artifact repository, and whenever there's a new artifact, they automatically update the GitOps repo for you. So the workflow becomes just slightly longer. You now have a developer pushing some code that triggers some GitHub actions, which tags your artifact, and that gets notified to Flux or Argo. Flux also monitors, it gets a notification there's an artifact, it will update the GitOps repo, it will notice there's an update in the GitOps repo, and will then change your cluster accordingly. Great, all perfect, right? We have tags. Tags are very practical, very simple, everyone can do them. And with each tag, we ultimately trigger a new deploy. So we do have one kind of one-button deployment method now. So what does this look like? I said Flux will commit to your repository. It will create these kinds of commits where it changes the image tag to the new version. And you see behind this, there's a little comment in the YAML file that tells Flux how to map this line to some other custom resource that's in the cluster somewhere else. How do you roll back? Because I said whenever there's a new artifact coming to your registry, Flux will update and you get the new version. What if it breaks? What if prot is down? Well, it's very easy. You just go to this YAML file, manually decrease the number and remove the comment so that Flux will no longer automatically do the updates. Well, okay. That sounds slightly more complicated than pushing a new tag. But once everything is fixed, you can just bring back the comment, update the version, everything works again, right? It's just, I mean, how often do you do these rollbacks? Only when prot is down, right? That's usually the time when it's really good to look at the documentation on how the workflows that you never use normally actually work, right? So can we do something else? Well, I mean, you could, of course, just tag an older version with a new semantic version that would trigger an update, and you would deploy an older image as a new version. But, I mean, that gets you in all sorts of trouble, so better not do that. So let's talk about the third word in the title, which is promotion. Installing an artifact that runs in one environment into a new environment. How does this work with our workflow? Well, we're using tags, right? So now we have to tag more artifacts, use different kinds of tags. For each environment, we just use a tag. Yeah? So how many environments do you have? I mean, I guess you have maybe some kind of test and prod. Maybe you have stage and QA. And maybe then someone decides, well, you need more than one prod that need to be different because you want to roll out in one region or to some subset of customers first. So somehow we're now delivering, because remember, we're tagging. That was the delivery part of our pipeline, not the deployment part. The deployment happens magically. We're delivering to many, many, many environments, and we're using different tags and all sorts of tags, and that feels like we're now ending up in a situation where we might have too many tags. Not so good. Also, tags, I mean, git tag -- list is not the most convenient way to manage your tags. Some guys, GUIs do it better. Also, if you need to make a new tag, did you remember to fetch before you tag, or are you overwriting an existing tag maybe? There's also the thing that semantic versions, they aren't technically lexicographically sortable. So in the standard output of your git tag list, 1.10 will come one before 1.2 in your output. So that can cause confusion as to where your tags are. And also, let's think back a moment. I said GitOps, you want an immutable versioned record of what's running in your infrastructure. But actually, we're using tags on the source code which are mutable to control what's running in production, right? Because we just apply some tag to the code, and that some magic with this image automation does something to our GitOps repo, and things change in the cluster. So we don't actually have immutable description of what we're doing, we just have tags. Also, are we really sure that 1.3 QA is the same as 1.3 prod? I mean, they're just tags on the source code, so you have to go check somewhere that the digests are the same, or that these tags point to the same commit in the Git repo. But just because they point to the same commit in the Git repo doesn't mean that the Docker images actually are the same. So is there something else we can do? Well, have fewer tags. Refer to one thing by one name and one name only. And then use a different tool to actually manually promote between environments. And the tool we've tested this year is called Cargo. It's an open source tool by Acuity. Acuity was founded by some of the guys that started Argo. It was released as version 1.0 about a year ago, and version 1.8 came out last week. There's been a lot of progress over the last year. Many people said that the first release a year ago should really have been a beta, but for us, we've been playing with it for the last half year, and it's running in production, and it's doing quite well. And this is what it looks like for one of our projects. Now you see there's some colorful boxes there. Those are the actual environments that we have. On the top, you see a list of things that have different names and numbers. Those are our Docker images. And if you squint really hard, you might notice that some of these have colors too, and they actually match the colors of our environment. So at a glance, we can see which Docker image is running in which environment. There's also some arrows between these colorful boxes that control in which direction or in which order we can deploy, because we want to enforce that the image first runs in stage before we actually install it in prod. And if you're using Argo, you get out-of-the-box support for these two red and green, two green symbols there. They will tell you whether the Argo application in the background is actually behaving well. If you use Flux, you have to do a bit more work to get this to work, but it's also possible. And there's some buttons that you can use to click on and then promote the image, and you select the image from the flow above. And those are two pipelines, because for development, we deploy every single build to main, whereas for production, we manually decide what gets deployed and where. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Carsten? Yeah.
Do you find that the Cargo, so essentially understood that Cargo essentially has GitOps actions lines, it has a very predefined stages, PR, FTP, I personally found those to be, try this. And I personally found those cargo actions to be quite limiting. It's very beta. I'm sure there'll be more. But did you have to build a lot of custom tooling, like HTTP post APIs, to do like image updating, or did you just use the basic Cargo tools?
Yeah, so the question is about what functionality in Cargo we're using when we do this act. What happens if you click on the buttons, basically? One thing is that we do a commit to that GitOps repo, obviously, to update the tag. We run a few other things. We're calling a GitHub action in the background because we also need to do something somewhere on some Windows VM for legacy reasons. And then we're doing these health checks that the rollout worked using actual checks to our Mimir monitoring stack. So we're checking that the Flux object in Mimir is represented as green, rollout success.
So you essentially had to write maybe some custom images that you built to do this logic in Go or something?
We haven't written any images, no. It's all with the built-in steps.
All with the built-in. Okay, thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question.
So how do you basically do the rollback? You go again to the cargo and...
Yeah, so this is the button you use to decide which image to deploy. You can select the ones that match, it has to be the right kind of version. Here we use Semverse, here we use Epoch builds. But if you want to roll back, you just choose an image that's further on the right, because those are the older images.
And that again triggers some pipeline which overrides the tag in the Git.
Yeah.
So
it just makes the same commit, just changes the version back. So whatever image you pick, it will always make the commit that this is the image you want deployed.
Right, yeah, thanks.